part of my job is to instrument the consumer population and figure out where consumers are taking the market next, so that our technologists can aim their innovation vector the same place where the market's going. But along the way, cool, crazy things come out of it. So, we're going to talk about seeing through walls, X-ray vision, Wi-Fi sensing. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be both terrified and excited. So, a brief overview of the electromagnetic spectrum. You all have seen this probably at least 8 times in your life. And this is a fun little diagram because it shows sort of the size relative to the overall pieces. Radio's over here. This is crazy hard stuff. X-rays over here. And how much we actually see is right here. A little smart. A smidge, right? Our visible spectrum is pretty constrained compared to the entire electromagnetic spectrum. You all know about the particle-wave duality, right? Is it a wave? Is it a particle? I'm not sure. It's undecided. It's like a voter in Kansas. I don't know. But when these things show up all the time is that right now we're all seeing each other in the visual spectrum, right? And the way our vision works is a little bit different than the way that radio works. But a quick refresher, again, probably going back to middle school science. It's an apple. Woo. Yes. That's the fruit of our labors today. So, when the sun comes out, it was supposed to do that on cue. I guess I don't have the influence I used to. Anyway, what happens is that full spectrum, things are falling off the walls now. Full spectrum radiation comes from the sun and hits the apple. But what we see is only what's reflected back at us. Right? And so our vision is based on the reflection of electromagnetic waves in the visible spectrum. Can we see radio? No. Can you imagine if we did? It'd be crazy, right? You see X-rays and all that kind of stuff. It'd be nuts. But that's not all that happens. We actually goes into our brain. Our cognition says, yeah, that's an apple. So it's more than just seeing. It's actually the understanding of the scene becomes really important. Now, how can we do that with Wi-Fi? Anybody have Wi-Fi at home? Yeah, pretty much 100%. Anybody have a Wi-Fi device on their person right now? Yeah, your smartphone has Wi-Fi in it. Anybody see iPhone 10? Oh yeah, hello Cisco. Right? We have Wi-Fi all over the place. We're swimming in radio waves constantly, and they're being used chattering back and forth to connect point A to point B. Now, Wi-Fi is interesting because not only does it use radio waves to do communication, but then they segment and separate and play with those radio waves to work across different frequencies. Right? Shorter wavelength, higher frequency. And they use that to kind of figure out how to go around space. Because if we're all has anyone, okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit. Has anyone ever heard of a party line? Not political party line, towing the party line. Broadcast, what's a party line?
Party line is like a phone, but everybody's on it. Any bunch of houses can pick up their phone and be on the same line.
Right? It's like, and that's where I grew up. We had a party line. I couldn't make a call when my neighbors were on the phone. But it also meant that I could listen to the neighbors. So imagine if class was a party line. How could you have a conversation? It would be chaos, right? So a lot of the Wi-Fi standard is segmenting the rules for how to use a party line. You listen before you transmit. There's codes that you transmit. You transmit across different frequencies and different data and information around it, and different handshakes. Now, normally, when this happens, if there's nothing happening in the room, what you see in the radio spectrum is a smooth stream flowing back and forth electromagnetic waves. What midterm? I don't worry about midterms. So the question is, how can we see what happens in the stream? Well, when we put something in the stream, some of you may recognize my special guest. No, it is not Baby Yoda, it is Grogu. We see a disturbance. And that disturbance becomes how we measure things. Right? Because what happens when you disturb the waves, it's like rocks in a stream. We see ripples around it. And a lot of what we do in Wi-Fi sensing right now, as I walk around, as we're breathing, as you're lifting your forks to your mouth, you're disturbing Cisco. Is Cisco happy about this? We don't know. We haven't yet to that level of, can you imagine emotional intelligence within a Wi-Fi sensor? I'm sorry, you don't want to go to that link. Thank you for trying. So what happens, there's a bunch of different ways that the ripples show up. The first we call attenuation, right? As it moves through Grogu, Grogu absorbs a little bit. So we still have the same frequency wavelength, but there's a little bit of shrinking of the overall amplitude of what's going on. Another one that can happen, phase shift. Think about sine, think about trigonometry, think about woo, and you add a component right there in front of the theta. Yep, that shifts the phase. And it's sort of like talking a slightly different, it's like, have you ever been on a phone call or a FaceTime and there's a gap in what's going on? And you're like, hello, and they're like, hello. It's like Zoom in the early days. Remember the pandemic? We're on Zoom and so we're all playing like radio games. The answer is 25, over, right? We do that to adjust for that phase shift. So that's another way we pull things up. The other one's called time of flight, because we can actually send from the radio side, it's now 11:53. And this one gets over here and it says it's 11:54. This one says it's 11:53.5. Oh, there's a shift in time of flight. And the last one, which you can do with antennas, because current Wi-Fi sensors have multiple transmitters, there's multiple receivers. You can do this thing called angle of approach. Actually, you can kind of figure out, whoa, this one, that one's from behind me. That's weird. I didn't see that one. And all these things sit in the stream. The whole idea behind Wi-Fi sensing is that if you have two static things that normally have a calm stream, think about these classrooms at 1 a.m. When you fill them up, when you throw rocks in the stream, things get disturbed. And we measure that. And that's what we're trying to do with Wi-Fi sensing. So just to sum all up those things, there you go. This is, we'll leave the exercise to the reader. This is actually from the paper. It's a great summary paper. There's actually, I think, 6 pages of bibliographic references in it because they cover sort of every single possible way you could use this stuff, for good or for bad. But one thing to think about is that they're trying to figure out the channels. They're trying to figure out the cyclic shift diversity, all these different pieces, and they actually form the beams a little bit too. Now, why would it be important to know whether there's rocks in the stream if you're a Wi-Fi router? Any ideas? Yes?
So you can see what's happening?
You can see what's happening, but see what happened is that all this information we're talking about seeing, wasn't originally built to see. After a while, they're like, oh, we can see stuff. Because let's say you've got a Grogu saying right in front of Netflix, watch the next episode. Then the routers actually talk to a different frequency or to a different channel. And so they use this thing called channel state information as a way to sort of monitor the health of the network. Do we have too many rocks over here? Do we have too many rocks over there? What do we have to do to actually make the Wi-Fi work? Because y'all have never had any Wi-Fi issues here at school, right? Yeah, we're working on that. I know so much more about Wi-Fi than I did a year and a half ago. It's like a scene from The Matrix. I know Kung Fu. But I don't know all this stuff. But suffice to say, what happens is that with this channel state information that's built up of all these different kind of components, you actually end up with a 4D tensor. Right? So what happens is that each of these frames is a different slice of time, but you're sort of, you have this thing where you have the transmit and receive, the channel state information for all the different things. So Cisco up here probably has over 150 channels it can rotate through. And you on your laptops are also trying to figure out which channel to hop onto as well. And how do you share those things? And make sure they're not conflicting with some other noise source, or let's say, Mark fires up a Tesla coil up in the physics lab, that's broad spectrum noise, and all the Wi-Fi, or someone makes popcorn and it catches on fire. That's another problem. But the whole idea is that we have these frames of information that capture a mix of that attenuation, that phase, across all these different channels and frequencies. So we end up with a big box of data. Here's the crazy thing about it. With that information, we can sort of figure out, where is the stream not calm? Is it because of the noise of the Tesla coil? Is it because Grogu's in the house? Is it because someone's moving through? All these different places. And they can use this to sort of transform. Now, the basic pieces of it, we talked a little bit about channel state and how we use these things to measure. It basically takes 2 static access points. Now that other static access point could be your parental unit asleep on the couch with their phone next to their head. They're still sending channel state information back and forth. And all this data has been available since 802.11n, which is like over the last decade. So we've had the ability to see inside of our homes for a long time. So you get the channel state information from all this stuff. Then you have to figure out noise, right? The Tesla coil. Figure out the transformation, the signal extraction. Is this Grogu or not? What's actually happening here? Then we have all these different places where they're trying to figure out, what am I seeing? What's actually happening here? And then, of course, it's the detection, recognition, estimation, right? Is that really a cat, or is it dog, or is it cat dog? Isn't that a character, cat dog from like the Canolian? Yes, okay. So the question is, how can we actually see? How can we actually identify what's going on in the midst of all this stuff? Right? And part of that comes from some of y'all. How many people have had machine learning? Quite a bit, right? So think about it. If we have an X and a Y and a depth for the radio information, for basically where the rocks in the stream are and how those ripples are, we can actually start to then use the entire AI image processing workflow to figure out what's there. Whether we're trying to identify what the rock is, what the big rocks are, etc. So all the things we use in image recognition, right? Convolutional layers, all the different networks, and identification, we can also do with the channel state information. Quick time check. What time do you guys have to go to class? 12:30? I get to talk for another 30 minutes? No, I'm teasing. I'm not going to do that. Some of the students are like, no! Some of the students are like, yes! And all the teachers are like, so that's the basic approach, right? So we can leverage that to do that identification. But here's the crazy thing about it. We see by reflection. So cameras everywhere makes people feel a little creeped out, right? You know, what's going on? They can see me. What's happening here? Who went into the iLab? Who left the screwdriver right there? Right? With this, there's no visual information. You know there's something there, it's moving. And even today, it's incredibly sensitive. The folks at Cable Labs who are testing this, we actually have a house in Colorado that's our test house. It's like the smartest home on the planet kind of a thing. They have a little bit of bandwidth there too. But they're trying to set up the overall piece. And like, all right, go. Wait, we don't have good signal. Go. Wait, we don't have good. Josh, yeah? Stop breathing. Why? We can see you breathe. He had to hold his breath when they started the test because just the motion of his chest in the home with existing off-the-shelf Wi-Fi was enough to trigger what was happening. We're already swimming in these streams today. Now that's so current Wi-Fi is basically 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz from a frequency standpoint. Pretty fast. And what you can sense is limited by the wavelength. So think about what happens if the frequency gets higher, what happens to our wavelength? Frequency goes up, wavelength goes down, smaller. And they're already talking about Wi-Fi 7 being potentially up to 60 gigahertz. So if you can sense really tiny stuff, you can start to do things like detect sign language. So this is some people basically playing with RSS is basically the radio signal strength, and CSI is the channel state information. When they bring these things together, they can tell when the user is doing 3 ASL signs. They can identify those. So it's not just someone moving through their home. Yeah, there's a dog there, there's a person there. It's actually someone doing gestures. And that's with the current stuff. Now imagine if it gets smaller from a gigahertz standpoint. Why do we want higher frequency Wi-Fi? Is it just see when our toenails need to be trimmed? No, it has more to do with actually getting more bandwidth through. Higher bandwidth. Does anybody need bandwidth at home? Anybody stream videos? Anybody upload videos? Anybody make large amounts of content? Anyone finish the Quest video this week? Sorry, I had to sneak that one in, just for old time's sake. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And the seniors don't have to either anymore. Okay, so the way to think about this is that as you get smaller, you start to see different things. So let's think about the light side uses of this. Again, going back light side, dark side, right? This becomes really powerful for fall detection, right? We're all going to get older. Now, right now, the way this fall detection works is they have cameras all over people's homes, watching everything they do. Oh, and you might fall. But they have all that data, like all the data. They know what I'm watching on TV. They know what I had for breakfast. They know when, the dog went out to the bathroom and all those kinds of things. I just want to know if we fall or not. So Wi-Fi sensing has this benefit because we're not capturing all the imagery and we can actually look for the specific events of falls. Oh, hey, wait, and we can do this with existing Wi-Fi? Oh, that's kind of helpful. Right, so that means, if you've got someone, because right now, the latest Apple Watch, if you fall or hit a tennis ball really hard, it basically calls the satellite and says, I'm sorry, you're dead. You say, I'm not dead yet. So this could do the same thing, but now it's around your home in the environment. This is especially powerful for people with special needs or people that are trying to age in place. Another piece. Anybody play with an Oculus? How do those controllers work, right? Yeah, feels like an extension of your will, doesn't it? Now I have to do this thing and hit the buttons, but there's like 7 buttons and I can't see which button I'm actually on because I'm wearing the goggles. But now imagine that you can actually, your environment becomes your controller. Where you move in the space, where you move your hands, how you interact with it, becomes the immediate way to pull in pose information, down to individual finger digits kinds of things. You can sort of do this with cameras a little bit today. There's this whole class of algorithms called YOLO, you only look once. I thought it was a candy at first, but that's Rolo. These YOLO algorithms allow you to kind of do pose estimation and some digit pieces. This is how a lot of these things work today. When you hold your hands in front of an Oculus and it tries to figure out your fingers, it does some of that sort of kinematic constraints. Because it's rare that your fingers can move all the way to the back, though I think some students in the room can do weird double-jointed things. And so what we're trying to do in this situation is, hey, now actually, because part of the way to the headset is all these different things we need to control and understand our space. But the space itself is aware, that gets lighter, becomes easier to use. The environment becomes part of making that experience work. And whereas visuals, like for right now, let's say Jenna and I are in the same immersive environment, and I've got a camera trying to watch both of us, she's obscured, right? We can't see her because of if we just use visible, because we're relying on reflection. But if we use the Wi-Fi, it sees all. Yeah. All. It also becomes really handy for intruder detection, right? Anybody have Verizon fixed wireless at home? Right, the little white box? Cable guy, right? Cut the cable, which makes my bosses unhappy because they are cable. But that's okay. Verizon actually is using the Wi-Fi 6E in there to identify whether someone's in your home or not. Because it ties to the other pieces that are already there. And that's a basic, is there somebody moving or not? You could use it for seismic. You could use it for all kinds of things. That's available today. There are other people who are using this for doing pose estimation for, let's say you're doing physical therapy. Anybody ever have to do PT? Right? Like, oh yeah, you got to move your leg, and oh, you're not moving enough. Like, but it hurts. Do it more. No! One of the challenges of PT is compliance. When you're there, the physical therapist, they can force you to do things. When you're at home, you're like, yeah, that's enough. Okay, there we go. I feel better. Right? You have to do the whole thing. So this helps with the compliance piece too. Again, it goes back to sensing the motion, the movement. It becomes really important for elder monitoring. My grandma will be 94 in June. She plays World of Warcraft with my mom and my brother and my nephew, sometimes all at the same time. But grandma's 94. And so in addition to like the fall detection, we want to know, does she get up at the late at night? Right? Does she feel that she needs to go do different things? Has she not moved in 72 hours? That's a really important one. Right? Because then you can start to, I have an uncle who lives with her, which helps a ton. Has he not moved in 72 hours? Uncle Randy, get up! But by entering the space doing that, you have a situation in which it becomes easier to say yes to because you're not capturing that visual information. Because my grandma, she may be really good at World of Warcraft. She is, actually. Except when she gets into really bad dungeons, then my mom goes in and rescues her, and it's hilarious to see. hear their conversations when I call home. Dad, how's Mom doing? You can hear, don't go in there, Mom, you're gonna die! But the thing to remember in that overall space is that this allows Grandma to feel safer and us to feel safer about Grandma without Grandma being on every single Google Nest video. Right? Because again, you can look for trackers and markers, and you can decide whether or not to do this on the edge. Anybody have a Nest Cam at home? Yeah, Nest Cams shoot up like 1 gigabyte per second if they wanted to, right? They would swamp the entire piece. They load everything up to the cloud. Ring does the same thing. That's how you see all those videos next door. That means somewhere in Amazon and Google, all of our home videos are. Right? Every time you anybody ever done that DoorDash? Not the DoorDash like to order boba, but like you go, you ring the doorbell and then run away. Yeah, that was high fun when I was a kid. Now the closest neighbor was 1.5 miles away, but yeah. But there's a lot of positive benefits. Which what?
It's called a ding dong ditch.
Ding dong ditch, thank you. Okay. Arkansas, 40 years ago, we used different words. I don't even know if it was English. So there's all these cool things you can do with it. The question is the dark side. What happens if you start thinking about what you can do with this stuff? So right now, if you had this stuff in your home, especially if you have some type of edge intelligence, yeah, I can use this for myself. This is cool. What if somebody puts Wi-Fi's out, radios outside your home? Your own. You're instrumented. They can figure out all the goodies about you. Even that tinfoil cap doesn't help because it just reflects all the waves. That becomes a big issue. And that's one of the things, yeah, question.
You might cover this, but and I don't know much about this, but if you have like Wi-Fi in your home and then Wi-Fi out of the home, would that mess with each other? Or would it be like two clear views?
It would be two different views. The question that comes up, and we've got some people looking at it, can you use your internal Wi-Fi to create destructive interference with the external Wi-Fi? That gets really hard because you're hopping all around and all that kind of stuff. It's almost better just to turn the Tesla coil at home and just use Ethernet instead. Or even better, to go back to like semaphore flags. How was your day? It was fine. But that's a hard question, right? It means any space could be instrumented. Now, law enforcement can use this, because all you're doing is figuring out if there's rocks in the stream. Bad characters could use this. It comes up in a bunch of different areas. That's the other thing. This could be used from a surveillance standpoint. So we can do pose estimation, right? Is my downward facing dog down enough? It never is. I just wave at the dog. But now imagine you have the nuances of gait detection. We all have kind of a way that we walk. And you can probably be pretty well identified by your gait. So now, let's say someone's trying to figure out, going back to Cisco here, school's already instrumented. IT already has access to all the channel state information on this. They just have to apply a few of these algorithms to figure out where you are and what you're doing. They know who went in the bathroom. They know who went around the different pieces. How many people are in the Selective Sound Garden?
You know how it's like technically you're not like allowed to have cameras in the bathroom because that's weird. Like
Yes.
Wi-Fi can like see through that.
Oh yes.
Oh dear God.
Yeah, anyone ever use their cell phone in the bathroom? Yeah, it works just fine, doesn't it?
Oh, so that's how you found out that there were a bunch of people in the gender neutral restroom, so they weren't supposed to be.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Do you predict that as people start to realize this, like those like Tesla coils, like Faraday cages and stuff like that will become like the next fad?
I think, how does everyone feel about wearing kind of aluminized Mylar jumpsuits, right? We look like those old Intel commercials with the bunny suits. It's the future. Has anyone ever hooked into free municipal Wi-Fi? Yeah, Starbucks Wi-Fi?
I'm scared of it every time I do it.
Yeah. So that what happens, let's say San Mateo puts Wi-Fi everywhere. Sweet! They also have all the channel state information. And so even if you've left your phone or have the burner and doesn't have Wi-Fi on, as you walk through, they know that you're there. They can track you back. They have their own game footage. And this penetrates walls, right? Because that's what we want our Wi-Fi to do. We want our Wi-Fi to penetrate everywhere. So that's kind of some of the dark side stuff. We talked about the gait recognition stuff a little bit too. That's a big one. Because you can identify people individually. And has anyone ever seen the movie Usual Suspects? So some of you who've seen it, so if I talk about Kaiser Soze and the shifting gait, you can pick at some of those things. And does that mean you have to walk like they do in Dune, where there's no kind of rhythm kind of a thing? What are you doing? I'm doing the Atreides shuffle. Why? Because of Wi-Fi. Because why not? Yes.
I mean, we all have a unique gait, but we probably all have like a unique body structure as well. Don't you think we could pick that up at some point probably?
Absolutely, right? Because we have our kinematics. My shoulder's only attached to one spot. I hope. If not, I got some other things going on.
Wait, but wouldn't clothes help obstruct that?
We do what?
Wouldn't clothes help hide that?
They can see through walls.
Oh, yeah.
Goes through everything.
So at the beginning you said people don't like cameras because they feel invasive.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of showing like this can also be just as invasive, if not more invasive than cameras, because you can't hide behind things. So then is the marketing behind kind of using this more targeted towards people, just aversion to seeing things like cameras and not things that see but kind of more like sense? Because in reality it's more invasive than a camera.
It absolutely could be. So this is where it becomes a challenge from technology and a marketing standpoint. If you can do all of this stuff locally on the edge in the router rather than sending it up to the cloud, it means you control access to it. If you can have it set up so that it only pops based on going back to, in this case, we're only worried about the output, right? Is this Xander or not? Is this a bus? No, it's Xander. Okay, good. When we're only worried about the output, then we can throw all this other stuff away. You don't have to let it out of your quote site. Right now, we're all sort of used to sharing the video all the time. And yeah, there's ways to figure out people based on the video and how they're walking through, but it ends up being potentially less invasive than having the full spectrum stuff. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, I have one little piece of audio here. Let's see if this works. This is Yoda confronting his dark side. He's like, "You're not part of me. My technology wouldn't have anything bad thing happen." And the dark side says, "I'm part of everything." So that's the cautionary tale of thinking about, as we create new things, there's light and dark side uses to it all. But yeah, that's been my little window into Wi-Fi sensing. Questions, comments, concerns?